and estates, and I'll be your chair for the next hour and a half. So this event has really got two objectives. Firstly, to celebrate the achievements of LIFT in the NHS over the last 20 years, during which more than 350 high quality primary and community care facilities have been created across England, which have made a real difference to patients and are helping the NHS with much needed capacity. The second objective of today is to look forward, because although it's been 20 years since LIFT was launched, the programme's term is coming to its end in 5 years' time. And my understanding is that there is a real desire in the NHS LIFT community that this 20-year anniversary should mark the end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end. So as well as reflecting on the success of the past, we'll also be thinking about what's possible going forward, particularly at a time when the NHS faces a whole bunch of new challenges. On the estates front, there's much excitement and talk about the government's flagship 40 new hospitals programme, with a policy refresh expected this summer. There's the somewhat less exciting and more depressing backlog maintenance issue, which continues to plague many NHS trusts. And of course, we have the relatively new ambition of moving the NHS towards carbon net zero, which is perhaps the greatest challenge of all. And that's before I even get onto the implementation of the NHS long-term plan and the effects of the pandemic, but I'll stop there before things get too overwhelming. I also want to highlight that in conjunction with today's event, the LIFT Council will be publishing its 5-year forward view strategy document, which will be well worth the read. This document will set out very clearly the LIFT Council's strategic objectives for the next 5 years, and we'll hear more on that shortly, but I just wanted to flag that very important document early on. Before we get to our first speaker, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping very quickly. We encourage all of you watching to turn your cameras on if possible, as it's always much nicer to see people's faces than just the black screen. The event will be recorded, and we do also ask that you keep your microphones muted at all times, unless you would like to make a contribution during our panel session later on. So please do remember to mute when you're not speaking. And during our panel session later today, you can also post questions in the chat, or even better, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself if you'd like to make your point in person. And then just lastly, we encourage you to tweet about this event. You can use the hashtag NHS LIFT20, and you can also follow at NHS LIFT on Twitter. So that's enough from me for the moment. So I'm now going to hand over to Sarah Beaumont-Smith, who's the chair of the LIFT Council. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Nick. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our event. We're very happy to have you all here. In thinking about what we wanted to achieve out of this and what we wanted to do, I think one thing that was really clear to all of those of us involved in LIFT is that LIFT isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's not just about building new buildings. It's really about people working together and people working in partnership. And so what we wanted to do was to let you see who those people are and what they believe in, and what they feel so passionate about. So over the last few weeks, we've been going around getting videos from a range of different people who've been involved in LIFT, some more recently and some over the last 20 years, to hear what their feeling is about it, what they feel the most proud about, and what they think the future offers for LIFT. So I think that we're playing the video, if you can all see it. Mike, can you play the video? As always, you have technical difficulties with these things.
Sorry, Sarah, I'll be with you in just a second.
Hi, my name's Alan Johnson. 20 years ago, when the LIFT project began, I was a local Member of Parliament in Hull. Now, 20 years later, I'm the chair of City Gear, the LIFT company in Hull. And in between, incidentally, I had a couple of years as Health Secretary. So I've seen this project from different perspectives, and everything I've seen has been good, because what LIFT has done is transform primary care.
I have personally been involved in the NHS LIFT programme since 2004. During that time, I have been privileged to be able to play a role in developing and driving up to 14 public-private partnership LIFT companies that have been so integral in delivering improvements in primary healthcare and community estate across England.
I've been involved in the LIFT programme since 2003 as part of the Prime UK Developments team, where we have delivered over 25 community assets in the Midlands area since that time.
For me, LIFT has always been about much more than just new buildings. The focus has been on improving local healthcare services for patients, innovation and wider community benefits.
What I like about LIFT is how the team operate differently. The team engage with the local community and the local health environment and want to support them in achieving their health outcomes.
LIFT has made a huge difference in St Helens. The quality of our LIFT estate is really good, and that compares to our non-LIFT estate, which needs a lot of work and is not always fit for purpose.
I've been involved in LIFT since the very earliest days and have chaired 5 LIFT companies over the years. The thing that strikes me most strongly is that we've delivered nigh on 340 buildings at a cost of £2.5 billion, the vast majority of them on time and all of them on budget, and delivering excellent value for money.
For me, what I'm most proud of is the fact that I come to Graceville Gardens here and it's a real community building, it's a real community feel, and it's a continuous journey. So even we've got work here at the moment thinking about how the world is changing and how this building can adapt to deal with that change.
Our long-standing team, some of whom have been with us right from the beginning, have built up a huge knowledge base of our primary care framework, which has given much needed stability and continuity in the ever-changing world of primary care delivery.
Many of those who were involved in the original setup of the model are still very much involved today, and I think that that's because they're proud of what the model has achieved.
What I am most proud about is the 350 buildings that we have developed in partnership. They're integrated with local authority services, and they also start to address well-being and the health of local communities. So we may have a leisure centre associated with the building, we may have libraries, we may have housing, we may have a football pitch.
Within the local community, there was a high demand for valuable services to be provided at the Nelson Health Centre, and together with LIFT, CHP and local community engagement were able to determine the services were going to be delivered from the Nelson.
The private sector partner with the NHS, the Outright Group, sees this as a perfect fit with our ethos to work closely with communities, and we work tirelessly to ensure that these buildings add value to the local community that they serve.
LIFT has a great role to play in making sure that what the primary care networks are able to do in the future is going to have the necessary premises to accommodate them.
The building is just an asset. The biggest asset is what's in it, and how many people we can get into that centre. And they're all vast majority of these LIFT buildings are right in the heart of our communities.
As a primary care network, we're really looking at bringing services together and working with our community partners. Through using the LIFT building and the rooms that it offers us, we can work closer with community services and with our practice services to deliver care not only to our populations within each practice, but to the communities that this building serves.
The buildings that we have created since 2007 have really brought health provision at the primary level into the 21st century.
Today, the LIFT programme is about so much more than just developing new buildings. And to make the most of the learning opportunity that the coronavirus has brought us, we need to continue to work together.
There's integration of different types of services on in large buildings, and also from my perspective is they replace a lot of rundown terraced houses that have been converted that weren't fit for purpose.
Hopefully we can make these buildings kind of really key community assets that do everything that we imagined that they would be able to do, and that people come to because they want to be part of them.
There is lots to be excited about for the future, despite the challenges that coronavirus has thrown at us. This challenge could be an incentive to finally move many of the services currently based on hospital sites to either a digital platform or to the local primary and community LIFT estate.
LIFT as a project was groundbreaking, continues to be groundbreaking. There is more to do to improve primary care and much more to do in terms of the kind of public-private partnership that has done so much to improve people's experience of the NHS at local level and community level.
Well, thanks very much, Sarah, for your comments, and thanks for that video. Some very powerful stories there, which I think demonstrate the impact the LIFT programme has had in the last 20 years. We're now going to hear from Ben Masterson, who is Deputy Director of Property and Commercial at the Department of Health and Social Care. Ben's going to speak to us for about 15 minutes. And Ben, we're very grateful to you for taking the time to talk to us today. So over to you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thanks. I'm very grateful to be invited. Can people see me? And hear from me?
Yeah, I can see and hear you, Ben. You're absolutely fine.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks. Sorry, I don't usually use Zoom. The department's preferred method is Teams, and so I was a little bit uncertain about how this works. But anyway, if you could all hear from me. First of all, I'd like to begin by thanking the LIFT Council and its members for inviting the Department of Health and Social Care's Minister of State, Ed Argar, to speak at this meeting to mark the 20th birthday of NHS LIFT. The Minister regrets that diary commitments prevent him from attending, but he's asked me to attend and speak in his place. I can't see you all, and I've often met some of you in the past. I was actually involved right at the start in 2001 or 2002 in the department in project managing some of the initial work on LIFT, and therefore, you know, it's quite dear to my heart too. But anyway, I'm here for the Minister, and the Minister did ask me to convey his appreciation for the investment delivered through NHS LIFT. And I note that the Prime Minister has also conveyed his appreciation too. And in the Prime Minister's very own words, I appreciate the major benefits the NHS LIFT initiative and the NHS LIFT companies have brought to improving and modernising local primary and community health facilities in the NHS. So well done, everybody involved in that. On the Minister's behalf, I'd like to cover three things. First of all, together with LIFT Council members, I'd like to celebrate the achievements of the NHS LIFT programme. Secondly, I'd like to highlight what we see as the continuing opportunity for NHS LIFT and its supply chains in the local NHS. And lastly, never ask the Department of Health to do anything at all, because you get our asks back. I'd like to emphasise some of the government's priorities for the NHS LIFT portfolio going forward. Drawing a breath, the achievement. The NHS Local Improvement Finance Trust, definitely better shortened to NHS LIFT, was set up in 2001 to drive a step change in the level and quality of investment in new healthcare and wellbeing buildings in local communities, with NHS local bodies, they were PCTs at the time, being a shareholder to ensure a strong fit with local requirements. I think that's been to a very large extent achieved. So again, thanks to you all. What actually was brought forward by everybody was 49 LIFT companies established across England, providing, as said previously, 350 modern, integrated health and community buildings, supporting community-based healthcare and other local services for the benefit of local people. Each NHS lift building is embedded in its own community, and the buildings provide high-quality modern clinical space. And together, the 350 buildings are home to over 1,300 tenants, including primary care, a lot of primary care, and services provided by, well, just over half the NHS trusts and foundation trusts in the country. And in a great many cases, local authority services too. At a very high level, we have 45 integrated care centres, 21 of which include local authority services, no less than 12 community hospitals across England, and as a real vote of confidence in the programme, a £50 million dental hospital in Birmingham. That's quite an achievement, and, you know, quite impressive that people were sufficiently confident in the LIFT programme in that area to move well up from the normal scale of the project and say, deliver us a dental hospital. Another big benefit, and whilst, you know, I note that you had a very nice video earlier featuring some commentary from the then Secretary of State, Alan Johnson, this again chimes with what the new government priorities. 40% of all NHS investment, of NHS LIFT investment, has been in the most deprived areas of England, and much of it in the north. So again, the programme's been, you know, part of a local and national levelling up agenda. And then finally, having acknowledged the contribution of the LIFT companies to the success of this programme, I'd like to, and I don't know how many people are present because I can't see, but I'd like to acknowledge the contribution of Community Health Partnerships, CHP, to the success of the LIFT programme. Firstly, through working with the LIFT companies as the government's co-investor in each of the NHS LIFT companies, and subsequently, and now very importantly, as head tenant managing occupancies within the 309 buildings. Before coming on this call this morning, I checked with the company and they informed me that 97% of the space is currently let in the NHS LIFT buildings. Well, I can't remember, but I did speak to somebody from well, I've spoken many times of people from the commercial property sector, but certainly in commercial property, people would dream of 97% let. So again, well done to the LIFT companies for having desirable buildings that are well geared to local needs, and well done for NHS CHP for managing them very effectively. And finally, and last but not least on achievements, we in the department would very much like to thank the 49 NHS LIFT companies and their frontline staff for ensuring buildings could remain open to NHS staff and patients even at the height of the pandemic, and recently ensuring that space could be made available for 101 vaccination centres, which, you know, as we all know, have been very, very key to the country's strategy for getting out of the pandemic problem. And of course, whether we agree with all of them or not, we'll have heard the Prime Minister's announcements on Monday about us being able to row back very significantly from pandemic restrictions. Now, moving on to the next phase for NHS LIFT, we see great opportunity with the new legislation and the creation of ICSs as legal entities. You know, these are big, powerful legal entities, and of course, NHS LIFT has been very, very present in local geographies. First of all, the NHS LIFT estate should be core to local service delivery. And now is the time for a key programme of work with CHP colleagues to ensure the buildings are fit for purpose, both for the next 10 years or so of rapidly changing healthcare, and at the end of the concessions, the lift concessions, which, as I understand it, come to an end over the next sort of 5 to 15 years in the main. Very importantly, the new NHS bodies will be expected to contain the commissioning functions now in CCGs, but they will have greater scale and responsibility for service planning, including planning of capital investment, especially at the local level where NHS LIFT is specialised. We understand NHS E&I is already engaging with the developing new bodies on estate planning, and NHS E&I is likely to issue guidance on estate strategies to ICSs in the coming autumn. I'm not sure whether they wanted me to say that or not, but it's certainly what I expect to happen. We've asked CHP and NHS Property Services to be on hand to support ICSs in producing and implementing their estate strategies. However, LIFTCos and their partnering services could bring a wide range of expertise to support the ICSs in this. The lift buildings will remain core local facilities. However, there will be opportunities for lift supply chains in delivering variations to existing buildings to ensure they continue to support evolving and new local services, and also in some or indeed many cases to increase the capacity of the buildings. For the foreseeable future, however, we anticipate investment being publicly funded rather than project financed. Finally, you will all be aware of the Health Infrastructure Programme, or HIP, of more major healthcare developments. This will have its own commercial model, which we do not expect to be project financed, but we would expect opportunities for LIFTCos to come out of the programme. And we understand that the LIFT Council are speaking with colleagues in the department about this. So I said I'd have an ask for you folk, and just to sort of, I'm sure you'll know this, but to emphasise some of our priorities for the LIFT property portfolio over the next decade. The first, as I've alluded to earlier, is maximisation of value from money from the portfolio. Now, the LIFT portfolio is obviously, it's there, the 350 buildings and 309 of them managed by CHP. In a sense, subject to what I said previously about adaptation to some extent being necessary, that portfolio of high specification property is there, but we can maximize value for money out of the portfolio by maximizing usage and occupancy of it. As I said, it's 97% let, but that's not the same necessarily as 97% used. We'd expect the lift companies to work very closely with CHP to ensure that space is adapted, improve where necessary to ensure that it can remain fully let and fully occupied. And that may well include facilitating flexible sessional occupancy, where that is the best way to maximise usage. And then, very importantly, LIFT Council members will be aware of the UK government's strong commitments to combating climate change. This includes a commitment for the UK to be at net zero by 2050. There are several milestones along that path for the NHS, but the one that summarises it most clearly, I think, is the commitment to cutting building emissions by 80% by 2032. This is ambitious. There are a number of clear measures that you folk are expert in that will help us, reach that point. But, just being very simplistic about it, LED lighting, greater control over heating and air conditioning, and improvements to building fabrics where it's economic to do so. And to the extent that any lift company supply chains are supporting, and I hope it's a very significant extent, are supporting ICS service and estate planning, ensuring best practice is involved in designs, and even in things like staff travel plans, because all of that, optimizing all of that will contribute to our net zero vision. Again, this is another area where I expect fresh advice and guidance to go out from NHS E&I in the autumn. So by way of conclusion, we are really proud of NHS LIFT's achievements. And again, in the words of the Prime Minister, congratulations to all working on the NHS LIFT programme on reaching this significant milestone. Well done, everybody. That's me done.
Well, thanks very much for that, Ben. Some really interesting stuff there, which hopefully we can unpick in more detail in our panel session later. Unfortunately, Ben's schedule doesn't give him any time to take questions, but as I say, we have got a panel session later, so do please save some of your questions for that. But thanks very much, Ben, for taking the time to talk to us. So I mentioned in my opening remarks the strategy document that the LIFT Council has created, and we're now going to hear some more details on that. So I'd like to invite Sarah Beaumont-Smith, the chair of the LIFT Council, back again to unmute and to talk us through that document. So Sarah, back to you.
Thanks, Nick. Can you hear me? Am I off mute? Yeah. Thanks, Nick, and thank you very much, Ben, for your kind words. I think it means a lot to us to know that we have, we're certainly on the path that we set out originally to be. So I think that's a great place, and we're glad to know that we're helping you to achieve what you want to achieve. I would say that over the last 18 months, we've been thinking a lot about what it is that we've achieved, but also what it is that we want to achieve in the future. And much about writing a strategy is about thinking about where you want to go, and taking the learnings of what taking the learnings from the past to see what you can do in the future. So as many people have said, LIFT has delivered 350 buildings across 49 LIFTCos. And I think what we saw from the Faces of LIFT video is that LIFT is really about people working together. So people working closely with their partners locally in the communities, people working with the tenants in the buildings, LIFTCo boards working together to kind of assess the needs and think about what the future is. And that partnership is a fundamental cornerstone to the success of LIFT. And so all of us at the LIFT Council are really proud of the partnership that we have with CHP. That sometimes partnership isn't always easy, is it? Sometimes you don't agree on what you want to do, but where you have a common objective and a common goal, you can work through those issues as they arise, and you can be successful. And I feel like that is where we're at the moment, that there have been many challenges over the last 20 years, but that we have worked through those challenges collectively to achieve what we've achieved. I think that was seen no more clearly than what's happened over the last 12 months with COVID. I think that I'm certainly proud, and I know many other members of the LIFT community are really proud of what we have been able to do over the last 12 months in supporting the NHS, dealing with the numerous things that COVID has thrown up with us. And it's been an incredibly difficult time, but also an incredibly rewarding time to be able to see that these buildings can be flexible, that they can really serve the communities that they do. So the fact that we had 101 vaccine centres, the fact that many of the buildings in the early days we used as kind of testing centres and hot tubs, that they were refitted relatively quickly to be able to do that. And all of that was done in partnership, understanding what the issues were, understanding what the risk was, and understanding how we were going to deliver what needed to be delivered. Personally, I was part of the Test Agile Health Centre, which was the latest LIFT building to open, which opened on the 12th of April. So right at the start of the pandemic. And that was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly difficult to make sure that the building was open on time, that we could finish construction, that we could get workers to site. But I think together we worked through each challenge as it came about, and figured out how we were going to deliver a building, which in the end turned out to be a vaccine centre. So it's great that it already started out serving the community that it was designed to serve. In thinking about partnership and in thinking about working really closely with CHP over all of these years, I don't think that we can't not pay tribute to Sue O'Connell, who I'm not sure is on this call or not. But Sue's been the chief exec of CHP for the last 17 years. I think she was in the video. She's made an enormous contribution to NHS LIFT and what NHS LIFT has been able to achieve. And I think many of us in the LIFT Council certainly, but many people in the LIFT world are very sad to see you go. But we wish you all of the best with your retirement. And we welcome Wendy as the new interim chief exec of CHP. And we all look forward very much to working with you in the future. So if we go back to celebrating the 20 years of an anniversary is about partly looking back at what we've achieved. And I think we've talked a lot about what we've achieved and the people who've been part of achieving that. But really, as we've said, in many ways, it's about looking forward. For me, I think what's really comforting is, in Ben's words, the tasks that the government set out for us to achieve are things that we're already completely committed to doing. So looking at how we can maximize value for money in the portfolio. I know already there's many LIFT companies looking at how we can improve the way that the buildings are used. For us, and certainly for all of us, what we want is for our buildings to be core NHS estate, for them to be community assets, and for them to deliver as many services as they can. So I think that we're completely committed to working with CHP to see how those buildings can be flexible, how we can how we can reshape them. So I don't know, for those of you who saw me in my video, we were at Gracefield Gardens, which was busy being reconfigured to maximize the space at Gracefield Gardens. So this is already a live journey that we're on, and I think we're all very excited to see what the next phase are. In terms of the strong commitment to net zero, this is something that's very much in the focus of all of our minds. So it's something that we're thinking a lot about, and there are many challenges with that, because those of us who've been looking at net zero know that there is a lot of challenges in looking at existing estates and how that existing estate's been built, and trying to meet the targets set out by net zero. But it's something that we're committed to doing, and we think is a really important part of what we can do. And we have a range of skills and expertise to be able to do that. So absolutely, we fully take on the challenges set out by the government, and we look forward to working in partnership with CHP to deliver them. So in thinking about the strategy, obviously the next 5 years for us is crucial. And I think fundamentally we want to make sure that there is a future for LIFT. As we said, we think that this is just the beginning of the end. Sorry, this is not the end, this is just the beginning. That there's many things that we can achieve in the future. And we really want to do that. I think we're all committed to do that. We're all enthusiastic. And we see that the art of the possible is enormous. So we were really happy to get the Prime Minister's words about the major benefits that the LIFT programme has achieved, and we hope that we can achieve many more major benefits in the future. One of the things that we're talking a lot, both to the NHS England and the Department of Health, is the link to the Cavell Centre programme. So the Cavell Centre pioneers, there are already some LIFT partners who are involved in developing these pioneer projects. And I think one of the key elements for us is that long-term thinking around around the Cavell Centres. Much of what the Cavell Centres were set out to achieve is what LIFT buildings were set up to achieve 20 years ago. So, you know, LIFT buildings are already designed to provide integrated services. They were designed to provide solutions in areas of deprivation, and that has already been achieved, as Ben was saying earlier. Also, we've been having discussions with the Department of Health around how LIFT can serve as an enabler for the health infrastructure plan. So in the health infrastructure plan, it talks a lot about primary and secondary care, primary care supporting secondary care, and in community care. And this is a lot of what LIFT was designed to do. It's a lot of what we're trying to do at the moment. So we really do see that there is a key role for LIFT in the future development of the health infrastructure plan. As we move to this model of integrated care systems, I think it's a change, isn't it? And I think for us, what we need to understand is ultimately LIFT is about partnership. It's about working in partnership with the public sector to deliver and to support the public sector to deliver what it needs to deliver. So we want to be a key partner to the integrated care systems. We want to understand what their challenges are, and we want to work with them to be able to support them in delivering them. I think for many of us, we want to be a key estates partner. So we want to be seen as not just a developer of new buildings, but as somebody who can support the integrated care system, who's been part of the local health delivery system for a long period of time, who understands what the challenges are, who understands what needs to be done and how that can be achieved. So really it comes back to the element of partnership, that we want to be a key estates partner, both with the integrated care systems and with community health partnerships. So really those are the key elements of our 5-year forward view. I'm sure that we'll discuss them a little bit more in the panel discussion a little bit later, and the document will be issued later today. We're here, we want to have discussions. We really truly do believe in the art of the possible, and we're incredibly proud of what we've done, but we know that this is not the end, that really this is just the beginning of a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of hard work to do. But hopefully what you will see from today is that there are an incredible amount of people who are truly committed to doing what we do, who feel incredibly passionate about what we do and are ready to take up that challenge to meet all of the challenges that lie ahead. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into where our thinking's been at and what we're hoping to be able to achieve in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years. So I look forward to an interesting discussion later on. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks very much for that, Sarah. Really interesting. And I, as I said earlier, urge everyone to read the strategy document. It's a really interesting piece of work which sets out why this programme is so important to the NHS. So we've got about 45-50 minutes to go, and it's now time for our final session of the day. And we're going to be discussing how the LIFT model can play a role in the future of the NHS. As I said in my opening remarks, this 20-year anniversary comes amid a hugely challenging time for the NHS, with opportunity for much needed infrastructure, the move to more integrated services, the ambition of getting to net zero, as some speakers have already said, the COVID recovery, financial sustainability, and all the other ambitions of the NHS long-term plan. So on the panel to discuss LIFT's role in all of this are Philip Dunne MP, who also served as a health minister previously. He's going to speak first. He has to leave, I'm told, just before 11:30, so don't be surprised if he disappears around that time. We've also got Catherine Mason, the chair of Community Health Partnership, or CHP, and then we've got two speakers from LIFT companies, and they are Wayne Ashton from Eric Wright Group and Elaine Sue from GP Partnerships. So each of the speakers are going to talk for 5 to 10 minutes with their opening remarks, and then we'll move into a Q&A. And we're very keen for this session to be interactive. So I would encourage all of you watching to put any questions you'd like to the panel. You can either, as I said earlier, type it into the chat box, or you can put your hand up and hopefully I'll be able to ask you to unmute so you can make your contribution. So Philip is going to kick us off. So over to you, Philip.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you for inviting me to join you today and to celebrate 20 years of LIFT providing state-of-the-art facilities for communities right across the country. I've got 5 points I want to make quite briefly, and they're really challenges to be thinking about as you seek to develop a model for the next 20 years. And they've been touched on a bit by Sarah in her remarks. And the first is really to see where developing facilities for primary and community care fits in with the NHS 10-year plan. There is going to continue to be very significant pressure on capital budgets, notwithstanding the extra funding that the government has made available to the NHS, and it tends to get absorbed in revenue funding, and there is always pressure on the capital budget, as I know, having had briefly some responsibility for it and for allocating. And the priority is for the manifesto commitment to deliver 40 new hospitals. Now that capital budget is under significant strain, So the government, in order to continue to invest in primary and community care, is going to need to find alternative means to do it. And there is clearly a potential role for PPP through the LIFT model, which, as we've been hearing, has done so much for communities in the last 20 years. But it's not, the contribution from the NHS capital budget is going to be constrained, and I think that's where there is an opportunity here. But the equation will also relate to what pressure does funding the annual payments to the owners of the buildings going to place on the revenue budget of the NHS going forward. So one's got to be careful to ensure that that is done affordably. The second thing I'd like to challenge is the issues coming up today. We've got the Health and Social Care Bill second reading debate this afternoon, very timely for this conference. And this is going to establish the integrated care systems on a statutory footing, which is, I think, a very positive move forward. But one of the consequences of bringing decision-making together across a healthcare economy is how do we ensure, it's a slightly similar point to the previous one, that primary care facilities don't get squeezed out by the pressure to improve acute facilities within the ICSs. The acute voice is a powerful one. The primary voice is more dispersed, and there is a challenge there as we move into a more integrated structure. The third observation I have is that after 20 years of LIFT facilities, some of them, the early ones, are now entering into the final years of the financial structure. And there is a clear concern, which I was familiar with, and I see Stephen Hammond is on the call, and I know he was concerned about this when he was in the department, that the financial owners of assets, as you reach the end of the financial arrangement, may be tempted to limit their maintenance spend so that they can extract as much financial benefit for themselves as they can as it winds down. That's a considerable concern for the department and for the Treasury to ensure that doesn't happen, and that the buildings are left in good condition when handed over, if that's what's happening to them. It will also depend on the circumstances of each facility. But I think it's an important thing for this community to be thinking about, and to provide reassurance to the department that that concern is not going to be realised, and that there is as smooth a handover as possible to whatever the successor owner is going to be. The fourth observation I have is that there are two, I came across LIFT through locally as a constituency MP. There were two facilities built about 10 years ago in my constituency, and in both cases they were substantially over-spec'd. So in both cases there is an upper story, in one case in a 3-story building and another in a 2-story building, which are barely used, and that imposes cost on the operator to have to fund space that is not it's hard to find alternative use for. There are some places where you can do that, but in some places, such as rural parts of the country, like where I represent on the Welsh borders, there aren't necessarily lots of other clinics that you can put into empty space. So building the right size of facilities for the location, accepting there will be need for some capacity to grow, is really important. And there will be some trusts that have been somewhat scarred by having empty space which they're having to pay for. So getting the space right I think is really important for the future. And my final observation goes back to what was being said by Ben, and that, wearing my current hat as chairman of the Environmental Audit Committee, is the whole impact of moving to a low or zero carbon future. As a committee, we looked at heat waves and the impact that the preparation that the NHS is doing to cope with hotter summers. It's not just about colder winters. And this was 3 years ago, and it'd be fair to say, I think, that not much was the short answer. In building new facilities, clearly it's possible to adapt, to make buildings adaptable, but retrofitting both to cope with the insulation needed when it's cold, but also to allow buildings to be properly ventilated and breathe when it's hot, is a major challenge. And I know the NHS are gripping this challenge, but when looking at buildings being built through the LIFT programme, ensuring that they meet building standards that may not yet be in place is really important. We see this around us, where domestic buildings are being put up which do not meet what we know will become the future home standard at the moment, and they will have to be retrofitted. It would be extremely unfortunate if, having put all the effort into building new facilities under LIFT, they've got to be renovated in a few years' time in order to meet the energy efficiency standards that the government will be requiring. So those are really my challenges for the future, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be around to take part in a discussion about them, but thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks very much. You've set the scene really nicely there, and some good challenges that we'll talk about in the next 40 minutes. And thanks very much for taking the time again today. Catherine, I'll hand over to you for your opening remarks.
Nearly made a rookie error of not coming off mute, but good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here to celebrate the NHS LIFT programme with you. It's an infrastructure programme, as we've heard, created by CHP under the sponsorship of the Department of Health 20 years ago. LIFT is a very successful delivery model that has been copied all over the world. Scottish Futures Trust and Welsh Mutual Investment Model are innovations based on LIFT. It is a unique partnership that has developed and now operates a portfolio, as we've heard, of 350 high quality health buildings. And if Dr. Sue O'Connell, a long-serving and outgoing CEO, was here today, she would talk about the triple aim of LIFT. Sue attended her last board meeting yesterday and has earned herself a well-earned retirement break at the moment. Sue would have talked about delivering for staff, for patients, and also the taxpayer. So NHS staff love working in them, they're great buildings. Patients love receiving their care in them. They feel like lovely places to be. And we've been able to maximise the value for taxpayers. We've heard already that we have a portfolio worth over 2.5 billion, but that was created from just £100 million worth of public capital, so a very efficient scheme. I joined CHP as chair in 2019 because I had a strong connection to its purpose of providing much needed, high quality, community-based health estate. It started 20 years ago, but we've already heard how strongly that ambition chimes with today's direction of travel and the long-term plan. It was created to enable excellent care for patients and for local people. This has been possible through the public-private partnerships developed through the LIFT programme. LIFT's core principles of developing the primary care and community health estate to drive improvements in population health and support the greater integration of care delivery are absolutely relevant today. And as we've heard, really important, as Philip said, to protect the focus on this whilst acutes have a lot of the media and airtime. Over the past 2 decades, the LIFT programme has evolved, and CHP now plays 3 key roles: as public sector shareholder, as tenant in over 300 LIFT buildings, and as a participant with access to a wealth of pre-procured specialist estate skills. One of the things I've been impressed with most about CHP and LIFT is the unwavering focus on meeting the needs of the NHS when the programme was created, the NHS now, and really importantly, looking to the NHS in the future. Only the other day, I visited a lift facility in my local area in my role as chair of an NHS community trust. And it was fantastic to see firsthand how the facility has been transformed to support the local NHS's response to COVID. The centre was repurposed to accommodate 72 intermediate beds in only 3 weeks, which is pretty extraordinary. The speed of delivery was remarkable and delivered through the lockdown as well. It's a great example of partnership working between the NHS Trust, CHP and the local LIFTco. I cannot emphasise strongly enough the importance of meeting the needs of the NHS. Early last year, CHP undertook a piece of research to gather insight from our key strategic stakeholders. We spoke to a number of senior estates people in NHS EI and across ICSs to really understand what they needed from CHP and LIFT. And there's quite a lot they want from us. They told us they needed LIFT to help, particularly with mobilising skills around estate strategy and delivery. And Ben spoke earlier about the requirement of ICSs to create strategic estate plan with guidance coming this autumn. They asked us to make lift buildings work better to drive value and be more responsive. And we've heard that value for money theme and occupancy theme coming through. They valued the uniqueness of the LIFT partnership. Both the skills and experience are open with open offers to help. They really value that. Looking to the future, I think this bodes well. And the impetus is on us collectively to keep listening and responding to the NHS. And it's important that we do this working as one. I think the opportunities lie in showcasing how the LIFT estate already delivers on the ambitions of the NHS long-term plan. It's as if the long-term plan was created to follow what the LIFT programme has been instigating. However, it already supports integrated care and holistic approaches to care. We need to be bolder sometimes, I think, in demonstrating how the LIFT buildings are core community assets, promoting them as central to local estate strategies. And we need to share the evidence of how they're enabling transformation of clinical services in integrated care systems. The challenge will be how the LIFT estate can flex to support more and different kinds of care, such as social prescribing. And we saw from Sarah how she was in a building that was being renewed and refreshed even as we spoke. There are great emerging examples of this. Our community integration programme is drawn on the skills and expertise of our LIFTCos and managed service providers in Plymouth, where the Mount Gould Local Care Centre is now considered a core strategic asset in Plymouth's health infrastructure plan. The utilisation of Mount Gould will increase as services are consolidated and relocated to the LIFT building, which plays to the theme that Philip introduced regarding making sure that the space is all well occupied and utilised. It's enabling disinvestment in other parts of the NHS estate, so driving efficiency, and also the release of poor quality assets to be disposed of, which improves the quality of care for our patients and service users. The ultimate ambition for the integrated health, social and third sector services at Mount Gould are to support those local health needs. And we'll watch the progress with great interest. I think it's a really interesting programme of work. The COVID pandemic has brought to the fore the digital ways of working and digital healthcare delivery. The LIFT estate needs to get ahead of the curve on this and think about how the physical infrastructure meets the needs of digital delivery. The opportunities in this space are boundless, but we need the vision, the innovation, and people willing to take a risk. We spoke yesterday at the board about digitisation in our buildings. The partnerships working in NCL, which was an example we were looking at, in addition to the work already mentioned, is also looking at digital connectivity within and across the LIFT buildings, and this will facilitate tech-enabled innovation in service delivery. It's exciting and the way of the future. We've spoken quite a bit about environmental sustainability. It is indeed a hot topic, but it is a real core focus for us. We've heard about the ambitions of the NHS Green Plan regarding net zero. And I think our estate has an important role to play in decarbonisation and reducing energy consumption. We're clearly some of the very best buildings in the NHS, and we want to continue to be in that space. And we must rise to the challenge of this change. And I think Wayne will speak more on this in a moment. It would also be wrong of me not to mention the increasing importance of social value. We've talked a little bit about the community, but the lift buildings are absolutely community assets. They're not just healthcare environments, but they are really at the heart of local communities. And that means facilitating greater community use. We already see this with some local collaborations in terms of art in the buildings, community gardens and community fairs being run in reception spaces, at least when COVID allows. The potential in this area is quite substantial. Of course, underpinning all of this is great partnership working, and we've heard so much of that today. LIFT enables the NHS to access the much valued estate skills and capability that Ben spoke of positively about earlier. And keeping true to partnership working has brought great success. And I believe will keep LIFT going for years to come. As Sarah has said, this is the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. Thank you very much. I hope to have a few questions to answer later.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Really good to hear the CHP's take there. So we've got Wayne and Elaine up next. So we'll go to Wayne first and then Elaine. Wayne.
It's really great to be here and really to pick up on the sort of our decarbonisation example that has been discussed. It's a common theme of the topic. It's probably just an opportunity just to say who I am. So I work for the 8 Light Group, and we are an investor, and also we manage 3 lift companies in the Northwest, and I'm also a member of the Lift Council. And I've been working in Lift for the past 20 years. I started at the NHS, the Primary Care Trust, establishing a lift company, and then I moved into the private sector to manage and operate the lift companies that we have in the Northwest. I've really seen the benefits from both an NHS and the private sector perspective. And you know, we've used the word partnership a lot, and that's really defines LIFT for me in terms of how we work together. And it's brought the local shareholders and communities together. And I've seen significant improvements in both the quality of the primary care estate and also great integration of clinical services, which is really amazing. But what's for the future? So if we look for the future, we want this to continue for the next 20 years. We've got the best estate in you know, some of the best estate in the NHS. And we want to continue working with our partners and the shareholders to ensure that the buildings remain at the heart of the communities that we serve and are able to provide the services that are required to meet those local needs. To do this, we need to innovate, adapt and change to meet those needs and work closely with our partners. So how we're going to do that? One of the aspects to do that is our journey to net zero carbon. So we recognise that the NHS, and in particular primary community services buildings, have a key role into achieving net zero. So our LIFTCos have funded the development of a roadmap for our portfolio to allow us to get to net zero. So we've got 23 buildings across East Lancashire, Wigan, Bolton and Rochdale. And we've got a really good starting point. So we've already at the moment ensured that all our buildings are supplied by renewable electricity from renewable sources. And it really helps us to do that. And as part of our energy management of that energy, we have really good access to the data of our energy and our carbon usage. So working closely with the supply chain partners, we've been able to implement the data capture process to help us monitor the energy and carbon usage. And we've got a digital dashboard that we use to look at our energy and our carbon emissions with our partner CHP. And it's interesting because the data has identified that if we modify some of our stakeholder and tenants' operations of the building and how they manage the building, we can start to make some quite early wins, which is really positive. So simple changes to things like operating hours allowing to when the heating goes on and go off. And it sounds basic, but these are the things. And changes to building management system can all contribute to us reducing our carbon footprint. That we, when we've all it's a low cost room to do that. So these roadmaps that we developed. So we've gone for we've worked with our supply chain. We've developed an investment grade audit which identified the actions required for us to meet zero carbon. So this includes the replacement of our gas-fired carbon emitting boilers to air source heat pumps. And this works really well across the lift estate because they're quite modern. A lot of them have underfloor heating and it fits very nicely with that technology. We've also looked at upgrading the lighting to LED lighting and also the installation of solar PVs. And in addition, we are looking at aligning as part of the value for money that's been mentioned a couple of times. Some of the life cycle planning to ensure that when we talk for things like boiler replacements and lighting renewals, that those are included to help us to get to the plan that we need to get to. So how are we going to implement this? Well, we work very closely with CHP as our partner, as a partner site, and we did apply for some service grant funding as part of the public sector decarbonisation fund. Sadly, this was massively oversubscribed. I think it was 3 times oversubscribed, and we weren't successful to be able to get some grant funding. However, I think there is a plan B, and as been discussed earlier on the call, that this is a really high agenda item. We're really passionate about it. We need to make it happen. So we've got these 23 ambitious roadmaps across all our sites, and it's really important to us and our partners to make sure that we can find a way to implement it. So what we've done to move this forward is we've identified a pilot project, and we're working together with our stakeholders and partners to understand how we're going to fund it, how we're going to make things happen, and how we're going to move things forward. And then we can then roll it out across our 22 sites and feed that information into the wider LIFT community and via CHP. In addition to all those things, we're also looking to roll out our vehicle charging points across our LIFT buildings. And again, that's another way of us helping to reduce our carbon emissions. And there's a big push not only for patients, for staff, but also our supply chain going to electric vehicles. And so we're trying to ensure that our buildings are there. And one of the positive things about the buildings, and I know that there was some discussion before about some of the buildings being over-engineered. One of the positive things about these electricity supplies, because we need to put resilience in, is that we do actually have capacity across all our sites to actually develop these electric vehicle charging points. It's really positive. So in summary, and it's just a short one, it really is that our public-private partnerships are reaching the 20-year mark, and I believe we provide a long-term consistency and long-term value for our partners and stakeholders. The LIFT programme consistently delivers some of the best estate in the public sector and is well placed to continue to do that in a net zero way for the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wayne. And Elaine, over to you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Really good to see some old colleagues, actually. I'm actually looking at John Taylor. I sat on a board with you many years ago, John. It's been a long time since we've been together, but like Wayne, I've been involved with LIFT probably from 2004. And I guess I've lived through the evolution of the NHS. I mean, we started with PCTs and we're now at ICSs, and it's been quite interesting living through all of that. But I thought I would use today's opportunity to talk through one of our local areas and how we're working with our partners there. And the area that we've chosen is North Central London. Catherine talked about that earlier. We have done a lot of work with CHP and the stakeholders and all the estates team at the ICS over the last probably 24 months to actually do an infrastructure plan that works for the future. But before that, let's talk about what we've actually achieved through the LIFTCo in that patch. And this little slide, I hope, summarizes it. We have developed 11 health centres across the patch there. They range from small 550 square metre buildings to 9,500 metre square buildings in the Finchley Memorial Health Centre. We've got 7 lease plus agreements, 2 normal FRI leases and 2 land retain agreements. As a day job, I think talking about the future and plans and all of that is great, but actually this is business as usual for us. You know, day to day we sit with our stakeholders and we manage this estate. Very pleased to be able to respond to Ben's comments earlier about backlog maintenance, because in our lift buildings there are no backlog maintenance issues. Philip's probably gone from the call now, but I think his fear about shareholders trying to squeeze the assets over the last few years are unfounded. We have a contract that obliges us to deliver a building back to the system in the state that it was actually developed in, and that is what we will do. We also continue to work through this estate with the stakeholders on how to optimize the use of the buildings. And it is probably true that whilst they might be 97% tenanted, it's probably not used in as good a fashion as it could be. And we continue to work with stakeholders through variations, etc., to make sure that services delivered can be delivered efficiently through the estate. So now through the future. Mike, next slide, please. Moving away from just the health estate, I think the focus of what we've been trying to do in that patch over the last 24 months has been how to work as a system. And I think in that starts the whole process of infrastructure planning. Mike, actually, I needed the second slide. If I did have 3 slides, could you put the slide pack back on?
Sorry, Elaine, just doing that now.
Thanks. So what we've done is started to work with the system to understand the whole estate. And we've done this through partnering services through the LIFTco. As we all know, I think all the health needs and requirements of systems haven't changed much, but there's probably been a big challenge in actually understand what we actually have. So the focus over the last 24 months has been about data, analysis of the data, understanding what we've got and how that fits with what we're trying to deliver in the patch, what we call grandly infrastructure planning. And I think Camden Islington Estates Partnerships, that's one LIFTco, and the other one is the North London Estates. We've worked closely with what I would term as a willing community in the ICS to actually test and push some of the boundaries of how we actually address this issue. And in doing that, we have now got a set of data which is backed up by mapping data evidence, which we've shared with the whole network. And we've created bespoke plans to actually help the individual boroughs in that whole system to plan how they will deliver their services in the next few years. And I think, you know, you might be surprised, a few of you, for me to be talking about this, because this is not about buildings. This is more about services. But we always said that our estate was an enabler for services, not the other way around. And this time round, we have been through this process a few times, the planning process, but this time feels more holistic. The ICS is not just primary care, involves acutes. So picking up on the point somebody made earlier about acutes kind of taking over from primary care or actually dwarfing primary care, we've got a system here which is working holistically, and also we've got local authorities in the system as well. Mike, next slide, please. So what we did, just briefly, was we mapped the current assets. We did an analysis of the demographics and what services needed there. We also understood what the workforce challenges were in the area. And then we matched what the estate in its current guise was actually capable of delivering. And then we did a gap analysis to come up with a pipeline of what the system needs in order to deliver what it wants to deliver in the next 5 years. And I think to summarize all of this, what is quite clear and why it's worked really well in NCL is the collaboration and the partnership between LIFTco, CHP and the ICS has been tremendous. And we manage 14 lift companies up and down the country. And this is one of the areas where all the everything's aligned. And it's been a great pleasure to see some of the successes that we've had by working together. We've even managed to convince some quite cynical GPs to come to the table, and we've worked with a lot of PCNs, and they're now converted into the system. So going forward, what are the challenges and what am I looking forward to? The team, our LIFTCo teams have now been successfully embedded into that system. And I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we are hoping to help deliver what this plan is actually telling us to deliver. Knowing that, we will have to tweak it along the way because there will be changes and who knows what's going to happen next week. But I think that the partnership is now embedded, and I'm looking forward to working with that partnership over the next 5 years. I think that's it for now. I'm trying to rush through this because I know I'm the last speaker, Nick, so over to you again. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Really good presentation. Thank you. Yeah, we've got about 10 to 15 minutes to go, which is not nearly enough time to certainly rattle through the questions that I would like to ask, but we'll try and get through as many as we can. And as I said at the start of the session, please do type your questions into the chat or raise your hand if you would like to say something. But just to kick us off, I just wondered if I could ask, we've talked a bit about the LIFT programme term coming to an end in 2025 for a number of facilities. So I just wondered if maybe Wayne and Elaine, first of all, if you could explain how you are approaching that and what needs to happen by 2025 in terms of the relevant and affected estates. Wayne, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. No, obviously, we're working with the LIFT Council and CHP and all stakeholders to understand what the future needs to hold. So I think we talked about before, and Elaine's mentioned it. You know, we have contracts about the standards of the building, so we're ensuring that we continue to do that. We've talked about decarbonisation, and we're trying to understand what the future holds for the local systems and what we can do to help them. So there's things like decarbonisation and the new rollout of new services. So working with the local systems to do that, and as Elaine explained there, we're also working with the ICS to do their local strategic planning to make sure it all fits together to ensure that we can help to plan and then look at the future of the buildings, how that can be structured, what the opportunities are. And again, we're working with the LIFT Council, with CHP and all the stakeholders to be able to do that. So there's quite a lot to do to make sure that we get it right. And I think given the fact that we've got some of the best primary care estate in its class, we want to make sure that continues and we put things in place to ensure that happens.
Thanks, Wayne. Elaine, can I just get your answers to that as well?
Yeah, sure. I think the buildings kind of speak for themselves. I think it's already been said that they're high quality buildings, probably, you know, ahead of their time. As Catherine said earlier, I think our biggest challenge going forward is how we actually communicate that to the system and actually helping them understand what they've already got that they can use. I know there's a lot of talk about new initiatives, Cavell centres, diagnostic hubs and all of that. And actually we're sitting on an estate here that has all of that already incorporated in it. And I think, you know, we want to make sure that everybody knows that, and that's going to be our biggest challenge.
Okay, that's, and Catherine as well, you obviously come at this from a slightly different aspect with CHP. Do you just want to talk us through how you see the next 5 years in terms of managing those facilities whose terms are coming towards the end?
I think that probably the stakeholder that Wayne and Elaine didn't mention would be government and government attitude as well. I think that Elaine and Wayne are in good places, as are all of the LIFTCos, for ensuring that the buildings are as beautiful at the end as they were at the beginning, and we have confidence in that. And I think that the majority of the buildings are well located, they are flexible, and they are adapting to the changes in the NHS as we look forwards. One of the key challenges, I think, will be understanding future government funding models and exactly what that means for how the lift estate progresses. But fundamentally, I think what everybody has said is absolutely true. These are assets for the NHS, they're assets for the community. There's been a huge amount of investment in them, and there's a huge amount of potential for the future. So there clearly is a way through, and we will all work together collaboratively to find those best outcomes.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Catherine. And I think it was Philip who talked a bit about the digitisation of the lift estate, and to declare an interest, I did write about technology as well as estates for HSJ, so I'm interested perhaps in just getting your thoughts as well, all three of you, on how you sort of see the opportunities for digitising that estate and sort of responding to that challenge from Philip. Catherine, just to do it in reverse order, do you have any sort of concrete thoughts or examples of how you're sort of approaching that from a CHP perspective?
Okay, so the digitisation agenda is endless, and I sort of see it in three different parts. So there's an element of digitisation, which is our corporate digitisation, which is internal to CHP and not so interesting to this audience. However, it is a source of efficiency and better data. And I think Elaine spoke about data. So there is an element of interest in that. Then there is the digitisation associated with making our buildings much more efficient and effective, and that's the case study with NCL is ideal as an example of the sort of roadmap we're going through on that. So there is a huge amount of work that we can do in terms of digitising the buildings, and that's about efficient use of building. And then there is the probably slightly more fuzzy digitisation of NHS services and enabling our buildings to be the ideal spot from which to deliver those services. So the NHS has clearly had a digital agenda for a while. Nobody would have wanted a pandemic, but there's no doubt that that acted as a huge catalyst. So I sit as well in a community trust as a chair there, and there is no doubt that we moved forwards in terms of digitising our services. And some of that was more successful than practitioners had imagined it would be. Now, will we come to, so a lot of services, particularly primary care, but loads of other services that we delivered went very, very digital. And that has suited a number of our service users and patients, but not all of them. I can see us coming back a little bit, but we'll never be as face-to-face. I go around visiting services in my trust, and there is no doubt that when I talk to people, they are like, yeah, for some people it really worked well, and we won't be going back. There are some aspects that will be adopted. So we need to make sure that our buildings are well configured for those digital services as well. So a lot of change to infrastructure potentially there. I probably talked long enough there, so I'll stop at that point, but you can tell the enthusiasm that we have for the digital agenda in oh so many ways.
Absolutely, thanks, Catherine. And it always tickles me when we talk about all the digital changes that happened in the pandemic. So actually, one of the main saviours was the good old-fashioned telephone, which provided a lot of care as well. But beside the point, Wayne, just talk us through your perspective on that question about digital.
Yeah, so absolutely, you recognise the sort of the importance of digital and connectivity, and that yes, the pandemic has really moved things on. And across our Wigan patch, we noted that they had 95% of face-to-face consultations, and they went right down to about 4% over the pandemic. You don't believe that, as Catherine said, we won't go back to 95%, we may go back to 50-60%. So I think that, we really need to look at how our buildings work that way. I think from a LIFTCo perspective, I think we've been working very closely with the local authorities and with our partners, and the big rollout with the fibre, the high-speed fibre. So our buildings have been putting that. I think not to be too negative, because I think the use and with this call, we've got using technology to help us to do that. But some of the challenges we're facing across our buildings are the interoperability between different services and different systems. And I think that's the challenge, because everybody just needs an internet connection, and it's getting that connected and get it sorted. and you don't want systems where we're getting different Wi-Fi networks in, because it causes connectivity problems. I think that's a local operating issue. I think that, you know, with the ICS more prevalent and looking at the infrastructure investment, I think that will help to link it all together. But absolutely, digital technology is the way forward, and we need to make sure that it's enabled and also it's adapted, and that our buildings are flexible to be able to do that. With technology, but in terms of supporting them in lots of ways. Like I said, with the electric car charging, so it's all about how we use modern technology to our moving forward.
Thanks, Wayne. And yeah, I'll just let Elaine as well have yours say, and obviously just following on from what Wayne said, interoperability being one issue. Is that something that you found as well, Elaine? And sort of perhaps talk a bit about how you've overcome that, or any other thoughts you have on digitalization as well?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Wayne on some of the interaction between the different systems and the different platforms that different people are using. But just picking up on one of the points that Catherine made earlier about the actual digitization of the building itself, how to make it work more efficiently. I think it's all about real life data in real time. And I think that in the focus of getting our estate more efficient, that is what we should be aiming for, is understanding how our rooms are used, maybe through the use of sensors, booking systems, enabling sessional spaces. I think we have a long way to go. And as a system like that is probably something that will enable that utilization agenda to actually be achieved.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the audience at all? I'm not getting any in the chat, and I'm not sure if anyone has put their hands up, so I'm just going to take a moment to see if we have got anyone who wants to say something. Now is your chance to do it. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes to go. I'm not seeing anyone in the chat at the moment. Oh,
there's a hand up from Charlotte Douglas, Nick.
Right, Charlotte, if you could unmute and feel free to make your comment or ask a question.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Douglas from Equitix. So we, just for everyone who I don't know, we have a sort of interest in 21 lift companies. So it's a pretty big chunk of what we've been talking about here. And I think it's been really interesting to sort of reflect on kind of the 20-year position and the changing discussions that will move forward as we try to be core to the services, be adapting to the change and the requirements. And I guess there's a big community of us here, and I'd be interested to think about the Lift Council and Elaine and the other speakers on how we kind of help facilitate those conversations about what to do next, and making sure that we're kind of bringing all of those parts together to demonstrate how we can support the ICS and the strategies going forward to make sure that this is the beginning of the next stage rather than not. So I guess I've made a very good question. Everyone who knows me on Lift boards knows that I had to speak, so I just couldn't not say anything.
Thank you, Charlotte. Elaine, do you want to come back on that point?
Yes, hi Charlotte. Charlotte and I talk all the time because we manage a lot of Charlotte's LIFTCos, but it is an interesting question about where to go next. I think the momentum that we've achieved over the last few years is in danger of being derailed slightly by the current reorganization. So I think the challenge now, the best thing we can do at the moment is to keep reinforcing the messages and actually have that communication with all the people, including the government, as Catherine mentioned earlier, about what we have got and how we take things forward. I think we have got a system that is now hopefully, subject to today's hearing, going to be a real thing in April next year. And I think if we take the next 6 months to lobby within that network, so that when the ICS is actually coming to being a corporate entity, we can actually move forward with them, that would be great. And I think the other issue is our case studies. I mean, Wayne's got loads, all of us Lift community people have a load of real life examples of what we've been doing with system on the ground, because actually the system on the ground hasn't changed that much. It's the in-between bits that change. So, you know, how we connect up those people on the ground with the centre is quite a challenge as well. And I think we use the LIFT Council and our communications with the likes of CHP and the department and the local stakeholders to try and bridge that gap.
Thank you, Elaine. And there is also a question coming from Ian Butterworth to everyone, which is in respect of end of term, what direction does the panel feel Department of Health will take with LIFT assets? Maybe let Wayne take that one first, and then perhaps Catherine, if you can comment, Catherine, but start with Wayne.
Thank you. Clearly, Ben got off the call quickly enough, didn't he? I think it's very difficult to understand what needs to happen. I think usually, as Catherine alluded to before, we need to engage closely with the Department of Health to understand what the needs are, what the future is. And obviously, there's lots of change with infrastructure funding and how things are going to move forward. I think one thing that is clear is that we've got the best primary care state. We've said it a number of times across the patch. And that the system, you know, in whatever shape or form it will be, will continue to use those buildings. And what we've got to do is, as a community, with the LIFT Council, with our partners, everybody else, is engaging them to ensure that we're part of that for the future.
Thanks, Wayne. And Catherine, as chair of a subsidiary of DH, don't know if you can comment specifically on it, but I will let you have the last word in case there's anything you feel you can say on it.
Okay, so what direction does the panel feel the DHSC will take with LIFT assets? No idea. So I think that it's fair to say that obviously as we go into this programme of end of concession, we will need to work with partners across government. It's wider than just the DHSC. We'll need to work with a number of partners across government to identify exactly how we best match the direction of travel that they have for these assets and the funding. And I think we're in new territory. There are clearly other PPP, PFIs who are also coming to end of terms. And I think we can look across at those and see how they've been going as well. But I don't think there's very much that's come to end of term within the DHSC. So I think we'll be ploughing a new furrow here. So we'll all have to work together.
Okay, well, it's always good to end on a conciliatory note with working together. That is about all we've got time for this morning. So just before we go, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to the panelists and also to the other speakers today. It's been a really interesting morning, as I've certainly learned a lot about LIFT that I didn't know before. And I think we've celebrated the last 20 years of achievements in style, even though it was a shame that we couldn't do it in person. So thanks to all of you for joining this event. And before you go, just to remind you that the Faces of LIFT video that was played at the start of the session today, that's going to be available on YouTube, and also the 5-year forward view strategy document can be obtained by asking the LIFT Council. You can get in touch with them by emailing the LIFT Council at connectpa.co.uk. So that concludes this morning events. Thanks again for coming. Thanks to the speakers for their contributions, and have a very good rest of the day.